What's the worst thing a teacher has ever done to you? Take your phone? Give you an unfair detention? My story might have yours beat. My teacher ripped a life-saving medical device off my arm, locked the classroom door, and threatened anyone who tried to help me, all while I was slipping into a diabetic coma. And the reason she did it is even more insane than you can imagine. It began with a lie I told myself that morning, that I had time, that breakfast could wait. That single, mundane decision in the rush to get out the door was about to spiral into a life-or-death struggle in the most unlikely of places, the sterile silence of my fourth-period Spanish class. The first sign wasn't a thought, but a physical sensation, a deep, hollow ache in my gut that I knew all too well. It was the preamble. Then came the piercing, rhythmic shriek from the sensor on my arm. My glucose monitor, a sound that, to me, was as alarming as a fire alarm. I need to see the nurse. I managed to get out, my voice already feeling distant and weak. The room had started to feel like it was tilting on an axis. The student teacher, a Miss Winters who always seemed to be auditioning for the role of stern disciplinarian, just narrowed her eyes. Her face was a mask of sheer annoyance. "The state inspector is observing today," she said, her voice clipped and cold. "Nobody is leaving this room until he is gone." A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I gripped the edge of my desk. "You don't get it. I'm diabetic. This is an emergency." I tried to inject urgency into my words, but they felt like they were getting tangled in my throat. "Patience is a virtue," she chirped, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. "He'll only be here for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. In my world, that was an eternity. It was the difference between a quick fix and a hospital bed. My vision began to swim, the edges blurring into a dark vignette. I knew I couldn't wait. Pushing myself up, I aimed my wobbly legs toward the door, a desperate pilgrimage of 20 feet. That's when I heard the sharp, definitive beep from the door lock. My student badge was useless. A cold dread washed over me as Miss Winters spoke again, her voice laced with a venom that was shockingly personal. "I'm not going to let some teenager with a flair for the dramatic ruin my state evaluation," she sneered. My monitor screamed its high-pitched warning again, a frantic plea for sugar. That's when she snapped. She stormed over to me, her face a thundercloud of rage, and before I could react, she grabbed the monitor and ripped it clean off my arm, tearing the adhesive from my skin. The sudden pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the shock. "That's enough of your disruptions," she yelled. From across the room, Lucia, who knew what the alarm meant, shouted, "That's for her blood sugar. She needs it. All of you sit down and be quiet." Miss Winters commanded, her authority absolute. Just then, a flicker of hope. Through the small window in the classroom door, I saw the familiar uniform of the school security guard. He saw the panic on my face, saw the scene inside, and his hand moved toward the handle. He was going to open the door. "Don't you dare." Miss Winters' voice was a blade of ice. "We are under state review. If you open that door, I will see to it that you are fired this afternoon." I watched, helpless, as the guard's face contorted with conflict. He looked at me, my face pleading, then back at her, her expression promising retribution. And then he turned and walked away. The last flicker of hope died. A searing, white-hot pain shot through my body, a sign that my systems were starting to shut down. I glanced at the clock. 15 minutes. 15 minutes before I slipped into a diabetic coma. Or worse. Around me, a strange phenomenon was taking place. Half the class had their phones out, holding them up towards the ceiling in a desperate, silent plea for a signal. But we all knew it was useless. We were on the 4th floor, in the one corner of the building that was a notorious cell phone dead zone. Of course, Miss Winters shrieked, discovering their pathetic attempt at rebellion. "Put those phones away now. Do you really think I'm stupid enough to let you record this little performance?" Her eyes, burning with fury, swiveled back to me. "Empty your pockets. Right now. Show everyone the props for your little drama." My hand was shaking so badly I could barely function, but I did as she said. A few candy wrappers, my emergency stash, tumbled out onto the floor. She kicked them away with her foot in a gesture of pure contempt. "See," she announced to the class. "Always with the candy. always claiming she needs sugar for her condition. My skin felt like it was on fire, 1,000 needles pricking me from the inside out. "You know what?" she said, a wicked idea dawning on her. She strode to my backpack, rummaged through it, and pulled out my glucose meter. "Here, test yourself. Prove to all of us that this is a real emergency." She tossed it at me. My fingers felt like clumsy, useless sausages. I fumbled with the test strips, and they scattered across the floor like tragic confetti. I couldn't even manage to hold one steady. Miss Winters let out a derisive scoff. "You can't even fake it convincingly." My head was pounding, a painful pressure building behind my eyes as if my skull was about to crack. That's when I saw Jake, a few rows over, digging through his bag. He pulled out a Nature Valley granola bar, his eyes darting between me and the teacher. The moment her back was turned, he tried to slide it across the floor. But the crinkle of the wrapper was deafening in the tense silence. Crinkle. Miss Winter's head snapped around, her eyes locking onto the source of the sound. "What was that?" she demanded. We all froze, a classroom of statues. She marched over to Jake, saw the bar, and snatched it up. "A snack? During a state inspection?" she said with theatrical disbelief. Then, with a flourish, she crushed it in her fist over the trash can, the crumbs snowing down into the bin. "There is no outside food allowed during an inspection. Rules are rules." My stomach seized with a cramp so intense it made me gasp. The clock on the wall was a blurry tormentor. 7 minutes left. Suddenly, a voice I never expected to hear came to my defense. Trevor, the school bully, the guy who made my life miserable on a good day, stood up. "My dad's a diabetic," he said, his voice firm. "She needs sugar. Right now." Miss Winters didn't even blink. "You can start your suspension immediately," she said calmly. Before Trevor could even process the threat, the teacher's pet, Ashley, chimed in. "She always does this. Anytime there's an important test or an observation, she has an emergency. Remember what happened during finals last semester?" "Ashley, you're insane." "Shut up," someone yelled from the back. "Look at her. Her lips are turning blue." 6 minutes. I tried to push myself up again to make one last attempt for the door, but my legs were gone. They buckled underneath me, and every tiny movement sent waves of agony through my body. The rest of the class was in an uproar, but they were still just kids, terrified into inaction by a tyrant. They were scared of a bad grade. I was scared of dying. So I did the only thing I could. I started to crawl. I began dragging myself toward the door, pulling my useless body across the floor. I was reaching for the leg of a desk to pull myself forward when Miss Winter's shoe came down hard on my hand, pinning it to the linoleum. The pain was blinding. "No one," she hissed, leaning down, "is leaving this classroom before 3 o'clock. There are no exceptions. Someone please help her." Sarah was openly sobbing now. "Anyone who gets out of their seat gets a 0 for the entire quarter." Miss Winters threatened, her voice ringing with finality. 3 minutes. Trevor was at the door, trying his badge again and again. "Access denied. Access denied." Other students joined him, a frantic, futile effort. My tongue felt thick and swollen, a foreign object choking me from the inside. Miss Winters knelt, bringing her face so close to mine that her features swam in my blurry vision. "You know," she whispered, her breath hot and sour, "I remember what happened last year when your mother tried to get me fired. I learned exactly what kind of family you come from." 1 minute. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, so violent I thought they might break. She leaned in even closer, her face inches from mine. I could see the hairs in her nose. "Pathetic," she spat. "Your whole family. A bunch of pathetic, lying manipulators who always." Crack. With the last ounce of strength I had, I surged upward, my head connecting solidly with her nose. Her scream was a high, satisfying shriek, and it was worth every bit of the searing pain that exploded in my own skull. Blood erupted from her face, a shocking spray of crimson. In the chaos, I saw the lanyard swinging from her neck. Her access badge. I grabbed it. The entire class watched in stunned silence as I dragged myself the final few feet to the door, every inch a universe of pain. I swiped the card. Access granted. The click of the lock was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Trevor wrenched the door open. "Get the nurse. Now!" he screamed into the hallway. "Somebody call 911." As I was pulled out into the hallway, I could still hear Miss Winters shrieking from inside the classroom. "She's faking it. They're all being dramatic. This is a deliberate act of sabotage." The last thing I remembered was a paramedic leaning over me, his voice urgent. "Her blood sugar is at 19, he said to someone. Later, they would tell me that for 2 minutes my brain function had ceased. I had been, for all intents and purposes, dead. Miss Winters was placed on temporary leave, but that felt like a slap on the wrist. She had tried to murder me in slow motion in front of 30 witnesses. And we, all of us, were about to return the favor. The ambulance ride was a chaotic symphony of beeping machines and disembodied voices shouting numbers that seemed to be in a race to the bottom. They didn't even slow down rolling my gurney into the emergency room, where a team of nurses descended on me, sticking new monitors to my chest and arms. The 4 they jammed into my vein burned, but it was a dull ache compared to the relentless pounding in my head from where it had collided with Miss Winter's face. A doctor with exhausted eyes and a kind voice explained that the trauma to my body was so severe I'd need to wear a continuous glucose sensor for at least the next 6 months. My mom squeezed my hand, her fingernails digging into my skin, as he told us in no uncertain terms that I was lucky to be alive. My brain felt like it was wading through thick sludge, but beneath the fog, a cold, hard anger was beginning to crystallize. A nurse began meticulously photographing the ugly, purple bruise blooming on the back of my hand where Miss Winters had stomped on it. She carefully documented the shattered pieces of my glucose meter that they'd retrieved from my backpack and printed out a long sheet of my blood sugar readings. The numbers made her shake her head and mutter about criminal negligence. Soon after, a social worker appeared with a clipboard, asking if I wanted to file a report with Child Protective Services. I took the pen from her before she could even finish the question and signed every form she placed in front of me. That evening, as I lay tethered to a web of tubes and wires, the school principal called my mom's cell. She put him on speaker. I listened as he danced around the issue with carefully chosen, legally vetted words. He spoke of unfortunate incidents and reviewing protocols. He never once said he was sorry. His monologue was peppered with phrases like liability insurance and district policies, and it became painfully clear that his primary concern wasn't my near-death experience, but the looming threat of a lawsuit. My own phone, which the nurses finally deemed me stable enough to hold, began to explode with notifications. The class group chat was a flood of hundreds of messages. Kids expressed their shock and their fear, a chorus of "I can't believe that happened," and "someone should have done more." Lucia sent a 3-minute, tear-soaked voice message, apologizing for being too scared to intervene more forcefully. Jake texted, consumed with guilt about the failed granola bar pass, wishing he'd just thrown it at me. Sarah was already sending screenshots of the story, spreading like wildfire across Instagram. While my mom was tied up with doctors discussing discharge papers, I opened the voice recorder app on my phone. In a weak, raspy whisper, I recounted every single detail I could remember, forcing the traumatic events into a permanent record while they were still painfully fresh. I recorded Miss Winter's exact words about my family, calling us pathetic manipulators. I documented the security guard's face as he turned his back on me. I saved the recording in 3 separate locations on my phone and then emailed it to myself twice. I was building an arsenal. Later that night, back in the safety of my own bed, my mom revealed the backstory. This wasn't Miss Winter's first time. The previous year, my mom had led a group of parents in an attempt to get her fired after she'd made another diabetic student wait 20 minutes to test his blood sugar during a quiz. But Miss Winters was still technically a student teacher, and the union had protected her, arguing she was still learning proper protocols. This time, my mom said, her eyes gleaming with a new, steely resolve, was different. This time, we had medical records. We had witnesses. We had proof that she had almost killed me. The next morning, a private message popped up from Trevor. He told me his dad, a type 1 diabetic for 30 years, was horrified by the story and wanted to write a formal statement about the life-threatening nature of what had happened. Then, Trevor did something that shocked me. He apologized for all the years of bullying, for every mean comment and shove in the hallway. He said that watching me collapse, watching my lips turn blue, had fundamentally changed something inside him. He confessed that he kept having nightmares about it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure how to respond to this sudden humanity from my longtime tormentor. Before I could, my phone buzzed with a notification from the group chat. It was Ashley. She was already spinning her own narrative, telling everyone that I had orchestrated the entire event to get Miss Winters in trouble. She brought up the incident from the previous semester, claiming I had a pattern of faking emergencies. She boasted that her mother, who was friends with someone on the school board, knew for a fact that Miss Winters was an excellent teacher who would never intentionally harm a student. A hot, violent rage made my hand tremble, but I took a deep breath, channeled my anger, and calmly screenshot every single libelous message she sent. Later that day, I received a DM on Instagram. It was the security guard. In a long, rambling message, he apologized profusely for walking away. He explained that he had 3 kids, that his job was all that stood between his family and homelessness, and that Miss Winters had threatened him directly. He begged me not to include him in any formal complaint, pleading that he would lose everything. The message made me feel sick, but I screenshotted it and added it to my growing folder of evidence. Every piece mattered. The next step was a mandatory meeting back at the school with a nurse to update my medical plan. She looked haggard, like she hadn't slept since the incident, and apologized over and over, despite having been on the other side of the campus when it happened. She promised to officially document the 4th-floor cell phone dead zone as a critical safety failure and recommend the installation of landlines in every classroom on that floor. A couple of days after that, the district's 504 coordinator, the person in charge of disability accommodations, came to our house. She spread out a mountain of paperwork on our kitchen table and began explaining, in very clear terms, how my federally protected rights had been violated. She cited laws and previous cases where schools had faced massive fines for similar acts of negligence. My brain struggled to keep up with the legal jargon, but the core message was clear: we had a powerful case against them. The next morning, a thought struck me. This whole nightmare had been predicated on this super important state inspector. On a hunch, I called the school's main office. I asked the secretary about the inspection schedule for that day. After a few minutes of rustling papers, she found it. The inspector, she informed me, had been conducting a routine, yearly check. There was nothing special about it. She laughed when I asked about the lockdown protocol, saying Miss Winters must have invented that herself. The district guidelines simply stated that classes should continue as normal. The entire premise for my torture had been a complete fabrication. That afternoon, Lucia organized a meeting in the library. Jake, Sarah, and even Trevor showed up. We pooled our memories, constructing a detailed, minute-by-minute account of the event. Jake produced the crushed Nature Valley wrapper, which he had fished out of the trash can. Sarah had a log of exact times from secretly checking her phone. Trevor, surprisingly, drew a detailed diagram of the classroom, marking where everyone was sitting and the sequence of events. Lucia created a master timeline. We were no longer just classmates. We were a team of investigators, united by a shared trauma and a thirst for justice. We photocopied everything, ensuring we all had a complete file. The war was just beginning. My first day back at school was a surreal ordeal. The hallways felt like a gauntlet of stairs and whispers. I was a spectacle, a ghost haunting the place where I'd almost died. As I walked past the Spanish classroom, my chest seized up, my breath catching in my throat. Black spots danced in my vision, a terrifying echo of the incident. I stumbled into the nurse's office in the throes of a full-blown panic attack. The school counselor was called, and she explained that this was a normal trauma response, but nothing about it felt normal. It felt like I was breaking apart. A few days later, the principal summoned my mom and me to his office. He sat behind his imposing desk, squirming with discomfort, and confirmed that Miss Winters was on paid administrative leave pending an investigation. He kept invoking the power of the teachers' union and their lawyers, a veiled warning that this would be a long and difficult fight. My mom leaned forward, her voice dangerously calm. "Why isn't this being treated as an attempted murder investigation?" she asked. A teacher deliberately withheld life-saving medical care from a child. The principal's face went ghost white. The school's next move was as baffling as it was insulting. I was called to the assistant principal's office and handed a detention slip. The charge: assault for headbutting Miss Winters. I stared at the paper, speechless. She explained that violence is never the answer, regardless of the circumstances. My mom was there in 10 minutes. When she saw the slip, she let out a short, bitter laugh. "Go ahead and try to give her detention," she told the AP, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Our lawyer will be very interested to hear that you're punishing a child for fighting for her life while she was dying." The detention slip was torn up without another word. The battle lines were drawn. I spent hours with the school nurse, compiling a mountain of evidence. We gathered every medical form, every emergency protocol notice, every piece of paper that proved the school knew about my condition and knew exactly what to do. The student editor of the school paper filed a Freedom of Information Act request for the security badge logs and all internal emails pertaining to the state inspection. The administration tried to block her, but she persisted. Meanwhile, a smear campaign was launched against me. An anonymous Instagram account, Classroom Truth 2024, appeared, posting a blurry photo of Miss Winters' bloody nose with the caption, "Student attacks teacher over a snack." The post claimed I had assaulted her without provocation. My DMs flooded with hateful messages. I was called a psycho, an attention seeker, a liar. People I'd never even met were demanding my expulsion, even my arrest. The school was trying to flip the narrative, to paint me as the aggressor and Miss Winters as the victim. But my friends fought back. Trevor, my former bully turned ally, went back to the Spanish classroom and, using gloves from the science lab, retrieved the crushed granola bar from the trash as evidence. A shared Google Doc for witness statements was created, and students began adding their accounts. The real story, backed by screenshots from the group chat with timestamps, began to emerge, cutting through Ashley's lies. Then came the smoking gun. The FOIA request was successful. The emails proved that the state inspector was never even scheduled to be in our building that day. The entire lockdown, the pretense for the whole horrifying event, was a lie. Even more damning, the security badge log showed that Miss Winters had manually disabled all student access to the classroom at 2:47 p.m. She had intentionally trapped us in there. We filed a formal 504 complaint with the Office for Civil Rights, a document as thick as a phone book, detailing every violation, every failure, every lie. The school, panicking, tried to offer a restorative justice meeting where Miss Winters would apologize and we would all just move on. My mother laughed in the principal's face. The teachers' union tried to intimidate us, sending a letter threatening me with assault charges if we didn't drop our case. Our lawyer shut them down immediately, reminding them that self-defense is not assault and that threatening a minor victim constitutes witness intimidation. The fight took its toll. The constant stress triggered more panic attacks. A fire drill alarm sent me into a spiral, leaving me hyperventilating against a locker. But with every step, we were making progress. A student sit-in demanding better safety protocols drew media attention. The district, under immense pressure, finally acted. White boxes, cell signal boosters, appeared on the fourth-floor walls. Big, red emergency buttons, wired directly to 911, were installed in every classroom. Mandatory medical emergency training was scheduled for all staff. My own disciplinary hearing for the head but felt like a joke. They gave me 3 days of in-school suspension, but in doing so, the official ruling had to acknowledge the extreme and life-threatening circumstances, which was a legal admission that my life had been in danger. At the final 504 complaint hearing, the truth was undeniable. We presented the badge logs, the witness statements, the medical records, the security guard's tearful testimony about being threatened. Miss Winter's representative could only weakly claim that she thought she was following protocol, but no one was buying it. In the end, Miss Winters was removed from the classroom permanently, reassigned to a meaningless administrative job in a basement office downtown. The union would drag out her termination for months, but she would never be in a position to harm another student. The district rewrote my 504 plan, making it ironclad. It became a template, and soon every diabetic student in the district had the same protections. We had forced systemic change. A therapist helped me work through the trauma, giving me a name for what Miss Winters did: attempted manslaughter through deliberate indifference. Months later, I could finally walk down the fourth floor hallway without my heart try to beat its way out of my chest. The signal boosters were there. The glowing red emergency buttons were on every wall. There were 2 new nurses on staff. Every diabetic kid in that school was safer because of what I had endured. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I still wished for more, for jail time, for a punishment that truly fit the crime. But then I go to school and see a younger kid, a glucose monitor on their arm, walking the halls without a shadow of fear, and I knew. I knew they would never be trapped like I was. And sometimes that has to be enough.